Vladimir Lenin. Birth date: April 10, 1870. Date of death: January 21, 1924. Other names: Vladimir Ilyich Lenin. Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, better known as Lenin, was a Russian communist revolutionary, politician, and political theorist. He served as chairman of the government of the Russian Republic from 1917 to 1918, president of the RSFSR from 1918 to 1924, and chairman of the government of the Soviet Union from 1922 to 1924. Under his administration, Russia and then the wider Soviet Union became a one-state Communist Party state ruled by the Russian Communist Party. In Marxist ideological terms, he developed political theories known as Leninism. Born into a wealthy middle-class family in Simbirsk, Lenin embraced revolutionary socialist politics after his brother's execution in 1887. He was expelled from Kazan Imperial University for participating in protests against the Tsarist government of the Russian Empire, and devoted the following years to obtaining a law degree. He moved to St. Petersburg in 1893 and became a leading figure in the Russian Marxist Social Democratic Labor Party. In 1897, he was arrested for sedition and exiled to Shushenskoye for 3 years, where he married Nadezhda Krupskaya. After his exile, he moved to Western Europe, where he became a prominent party theorist through his publications. In 1903, he took a key role in RSDOP ideological split, leading the Bolshevik faction against Julius Martov's Mensheviks, encouraging insurrection during Russia's failed revolution of 1905. He later campaigned for the First World War to be transformed into a Europe-wide proletarian revolution, which as a Marxist he believed would cause the overthrow of capitalism and its replacement with socialism. After the 1917 February Revolution ousted the Tsar and established a provisional government, he returned to Russia to play a leading role in the October Revolution, in which the Bolsheviks overthrew the new regime. Lenin's Bolshevik government initially shared power with the left socialist revolutionaries, elected Soviets, and a multi-party constituent assembly, although by 1918 it had centralized power in the new Communist Party. Lenin's administration redistributed land among the peasantry and nationalized banks and large-scale industry. It withdrew from the First World War by signing a treaty with the Central Powers and promoted world revolution through the Communist International. Opponents were suppressed in the Red Terror, a violent campaign administered by the state security services. Tens of thousands were killed or interned in concentration camps. His administration defeated right and left-wing anti-Bolshevik armies in the Russian Civil War from 1917 to 1922 and oversaw the Polish-Soviet War of 1919–1921. Responding to wartime devastation, famine, and popular uprisings, in 1921 Lenin encouraging economic growth through the Marxian-tated New Economic Policy. Several non-Russian nations secured independence after 1917, but 3 reunited with the formation of the Soviet Union in 1922. Dachian Gorky, widely considered one of the most significant and influential figures of the 20th century, Lenin was the posthumous subject of a pervasive personality cult within the Soviet Union until its dissolution in 1991. He became an ideological figurehead behind Marxism-Leninism and thus a prominent influence over the international communist movement. A controversial and highly divisive individual, Lenin is viewed by supporters as a champion of socialism and the working class, while critics on both the left and right emphasize his role as founder and leader of an authoritarian regime responsible for political repression and mass killings. Quotes Vladimir Lenin. There are no morals in politics. There is only experience. A scoundrel may be of use because he is a scoundrel. The task of a truly revolutionary party is not to declare that it is impossible to renounce all compromises, but to be able, through all compromises, when they are unavoidable, to remain true to its principles, to its class, to its revolutionary purpose, to its task of paving the way for revolution and educating the mass of the people for victory in the revolution. It is not national interests we are upholding. We claim that the interests of socialism, the interests of world socialism, rank higher than national interests, higher than the interests of the state. We are defenders of the socialist fatherland. The proletarian state must effect the transition to collective farming with extreme caution and only very gradually, by the force of example, without any coercion of the middle peasant. Finance capital is not only interested in the already known sources of raw materials. It is also interested in possible sources of raw materials, because present-day technical development is extremely rapid, and because land which is useless today may be made fertile tomorrow if new methods are applied to devise these new methods. A big bank can equip a whole expedition of engineers, agricultural experts, etc. And large amounts of capital are invested. Nobody is to be blamed for being born a slave, but a slave who not only eschews striving for freedom, but justifies and eulogies his slavery. Freedom in capitalist society always remains about the same as it was in the ancient Greek republics. Freedom for the slave owners. There are decades when weeks happen, and weeks when decades happen. Unity is a great thing and a great slogan. But what the workers' cause needs is the unity of Marxists, not unity between Marxists and opponents and distorters of Marxism. During the lifetime of great revolutionaries, the oppressing classes relentlessly persecute them and treat their teachings with malicious hostility, the most furious hatred, and the most unscrupulous campaign of lies and slanders. After their death, attempts are made to convert them into harmless icons, to canonize them, so to say, and to surround their names with a certain halo for the consolation of the oppressed classes and with the object of duping them, while at the same time emasculating the revolutionary doctrine of its content, vulgarizing it and blunting its revolutionary edge. We are not utopians. We do not indulge in dreams of dispensing at once with all administration, with all subordination. These anarchist dreams serve only to postpone the socialist revolution until human nature has changed. No, we want the with human nature as it is now, with human nature that cannot dispense with subordination, control, and managers, are the united workers themselves. Will hire their own technicians, managers, and bookkeepers, and pay them all as, indeed, every state official, ordinary workmen's wages. Attention must be devoted principally to raising the workers to the level of revolutionaries. It is not our task to descend to the level of the working masses. Revolution can never be forecast. It cannot be foretold. It comes of itself. Revolution is brewing and is bound to flare up. Every society is 3 meals away from chaos. But suppose, for the sake of argument, free competition, without any sort of monopoly, would develop capitalism trade more rapidly. Is it not a fact that the more rapidly trade and capitalism develop, the greater is the concentration of production and capital which gives rise to monopoly? We will hand the capitalists with the rope that they sell us. An oppressed class which does not strive to learn to use arms, to acquire arms, only deserves to be treated like slaves. We cannot, unless we have become bourgeois pacifists or opportunists, forget that we are living in a class society from which there is no way out, nor can there be, save through the class struggle. In every class society, whether based on slavery, serfdom, or, as at present, wage labor, the oppressor class is always armed. Not only the modern standing army, but even the modern militia, and even in the most democratic bourgeois republics, Switzerland, for instance, represent the bourgeoisie armed against the proletariat. That is such an elementary truth that it is hardly necessary to dwell upon it. Suffice it to point to the use of troops against strikers in all capitalist countries. A bourgeoisie armed against the proletariat is one of the biggest fundamental and cardinal facts of modern capitalist society. And in face of this fact, revolutionary social democrats are urged to demand disarmament. That is tantamount of complete abandonment of the class struggle point of view, to renunciation of all thought of revolution. Our slogan must be, arming of the proletariat to defeat, expropriate, and disarm the bourgeoisie. These are the only tactics possible for a revolutionary class, tactics that follow logically from, and are dictated by, the whole objective development of capitalist militarism. Only after the proletariat has disarmed the bourgeoisie will it be able, without betraying its world historic mission, to consign all armaments to the scrap heap. And the proletariat will undoubtedly do this, but only when this condition has been fulfilled, certainly not before. Translated into ordinary human language, this means that the development of capitalism has arrived at a stage when, although commodity production still reigns and continues to be regarded as the basis of economic life, it has in reality been undermined, and the bulk of the profits go to the geniuses of financial manipulation. Official science strive, by a conspiracy of silence, to kill the works of Marx, who by a theoretical and historical analysis of capitalism had proved that free competition gives rise to the concentration of production, which, in turn, at a certain stage of development, leads to monopoly. I particularly approve of and welcome the arrest of millionaire saboteurs in the first and second class railway carriage. Competition becomes transformed into monopoly. The result is immense progress in the socialization of production. In particular, the process of technical invention and improvement becomes socialist. Capitalism in its imperialist stage arrives at the threshold of the most complete socialization of production. In spite of themselves, the capitalists are dragged, as it were, into the new social order, which marks the transition from complete free competition to complete socialization. Production becomes social, but appropriation remains private. The social means of production remain the private property of a few. The framework of formally recognized free competition remains, but the yoke of a few monopolists on the rest of the population becomes 100 times heavier, more burdensome and intolerable. Revolution consists not in the new class commanding, governing with the aid of the old state machine, but in this class smashing this machine and commanding, governing with the aid of a new machine. In the history of modern socialism, this is a phenomenon that the strife of the various strands within the socialist movement has from national become international. Logic is the science not of external forms of thought, but of the laws of development of all material, natural and spiritual things, i.e., of the development of the entire concrete content of the world and of its cognition, i.e., the sum total, the conclusion of the history of knowledge of the world. Capitalists can buy themselves out of any crisis, so long as they make the workers pay. In capitalist society, providing it develops under the most favorable conditions, we have a more or less complete democracy in the democratic republic. But this democracy is always hemmed in by the narrow limits set by capitalist exploitation and consequently always remains, in effect, a democracy for the minority, only for the property classes, only for the rich. Freedom in capitalist society always remains about the same as it was in the ancient Greek republics. Freedom for the slave owners. Owing to the conditions of capitalist exploitation, the modern wage slaves are so crushed by want and poverty that they cannot be bothered with democracy, cannot be bothered with politics. In the ordinary, peaceful course of events, the majority of the population is debarred from participation in public and political life. When the workers of a single factory or of a single branch of industry engage in struggle against their employer or employers, is this class struggle? No, this is only a weak embryo of it. The struggle of the workers becomes a class struggle only when all the foremost representatives of the entire working class of the whole country are conscious of themselves as a single working class and launch a struggle that is directed, not against individual employers, but against the entire class of capitalists and against the government that supports that class. Only when the individual worker realizes that he is a member of the entire working class, only when he recognizes the fact that his petty day-to-day struggle against individual employers and individual government officials is a struggle against the entire bourgeoisie and the entire government, does his struggle become a class struggle. The bourgeoisie are today evading taxation by bribery and through their connections. We must close all loopholes. Federal Switzerlandization would be a huge step backwards for Germany. 2. All over the world, wherever there are capitalists, freedom of the press means freedom to buy up newspapers, to buy writers, to bribe, buy and fake public opinion for the benefit of the bourgeoisie. America has become one of the foremost countries in regard to the depth of the abyss which lies between the handful of arrogant multimillionaires who wallow in filth and luxury, and the millions of working people who constantly live on the verge of pauperism. Complete self-government for the province, gubernia, and region, district and community through bureaucrats elected by universal suffrage. The abolition of all local and provincial authorities appointed by the state. What a waste that we lost Mussolini. He is a first-rate man who would have led our party to power in Italy. Addressing to a delegation of Italian socialists in Moscow after Mussolini's march on Rome in 1922. Human knowledge is not or does not follow a straight line, but a curve which endlessly approximates a series of circles, a spiral. Any fragment, segment, section of this curve can be transformed one-sidedly into an independent, complete, straight line, which then if one does not see the wood for the trees leads into the quagmire, into clerical obscurantism where it is anchored by the class interests of the ruling classes. You probe with bayonets. If you find mush, you push. If you find steel, you withdraw. Take a factory, a railway, a ship on the high seas, said Ingalls. Is it not clear that not one of these complex technical establishments, based on the use of machinery and the systematic cooperation of many people, could function without a certain amount of subordination and, consequently, without a certain amount of authority or power? The Gutchkov government is held in a vice. Bound by the interests of capital, it is compelled to strive to continue the predatory, robber war, to protect the monstrous profits of capital and the landlords, to restore the monarchy. Bound by its revolutionary origin and by the need for an abrupt change from Tsarism to democracy, pressed by the bread-hungry and peace-hungry masses, the government is compelled to lie, to wriggle, to play for time, to proclaim and promise. Promises are the only things that are very cheap even at a time of madly rocketing prices, as much as possible and do as little as possible, to make concessions with one hand and to withdraw them with the other. Thus, in one way or another, the whole world is more or less the debtor to and vassal of these foreign international banker countries, the four pillars of world finance capital. When a liberal is abused, he says, "Thank God they didn't beat me." When he is beaten, he thanks God they didn't kill him. When he is killed, he will thank God that his immortal soul has been delivered from its mortal clay. One man with a gun can control 100 without one. I am bound to accord you, in the name of free speech, the full right to shout, lie, and write to your heart's content. But you are bound to grant me, in the name of freedom of association, the right to enter into, or withdraw from, association with people advocating this or that view. Trust is good, control is better. Socialism means keeping account of everything. You will have socialism if you take stock of every piece of iron and cloth. This transformation of competition into monopoly is one of the most important, if not the most important, phenomena of modern capitalist economy. It is necessary sometimes to take one step backward to take two steps forward. The feminine section of the proletarian army is of particularly great significance. The success of a revolution depends on the extent to which women take part in it. It is true that liberty is precious, so precious that it must be rationed. The revolution does not need historians. And is it not sex, bodies of definite, uncompromising principles, that lead us into revolutions? We are marching in a compact group along a precipitous and difficult path, firmly holding each other by the hand. We are surrounded on all sides by enemies and are under their almost constant fire. We have combined voluntarily, precisely for the purpose of fighting the enemy, and not to retreat into the adjacent marsh, the inhabitants of which, from the very outset, have reproached us with having separated ourselves into an exclusive group and with having chosen the path of struggle instead of the path of conciliation. Exchange, fair or unfair, always presupposes and includes the rule of the bourgeoisie. I can't listen to music too often. It affects your nerves, makes you want to say stupid nice things and stroke the heads of people who could create such beauty while living in this vile hell. Communism is Soviet government plus the electrification of the whole country. Otherwise, the country will remain a country of small peasant economy, and it is up to us to realize this quite clearly. All official and liberal science defends wage slavery. whereas Marxism has declared relentless war on that slavery. The intellectual forces of the workers and peasants are growing and getting stronger in their fight to overthrow the bourgeoisie and their accomplices, the educated classes, the lackeys of capital, who consider themselves the brains of the nation. In fact, they are not its brains, but its shit. Whenever the cause of the people is entrusted to professors, it is lost. Socialized medicine is the keystone to the arch of the socialist state. While the state exists, there can be no freedom. When there is freedom, there will be no state. The goal of socialism is communism. It is more pleasant and useful to go through the experience of the revolution than to write about it. The way to crush the bourgeoisie is to grind them down between the millstones of taxation and inflation. The best way to control the opposition is to lead it ourselves. Can a nation be free if it oppresses other nations? It cannot. Give me just one generation of youth, and I'll transform the whole world. Sometimes history needs a push. Without revolutionary theory, there can be no evolutionary movement. A lie told often enough becomes the truth. Despair is typical of those who do not understand the causes of evil, see no way out, and are incapable of struggle. For private property is sacred, and no one can be prohibited from buying, selling, exchanging, or mortgaging shares, etc. Imperialism, the final stage of capitalism. Tsar Nicholas the Bloody, who has dispersed the First and Second Dumas, who has drowned Russia in blood, enslaved Poland and Finland, and is in alliance with out and out reactionaries conducting a policy of stifling the Jews and all aliens. The Tsar, whose loyal friends shot down the workers on the Lena and ruined the peasants to the point of starvation all over Russia. That Tsar pretends to be the champion of Slav independence and freedom. Notwithstanding all the differences in the aims and tasks of the Russian Revolution, compared with the French Revolution of 1871, the Russian proletariat had to resort to the same method of struggle as that first used by the Paris Commune civil war. Mindful of the lessons of the Commune, it knew that the proletariat should not ignore peaceful methods of struggle. They serve its ordinary, day-to-day interests. They are necessary in periods of preparation for revolution, but it must never forget that in certain conditions the class struggle assumes the form of armed conflict and civil war. There are times when the interests of the proletariat call for ruthless extermination of its enemies in open armed clashes. To be a materialist is to acknowledge objective truth, which is revealed to us by our sense organs. In a democratic republic, Engels continues, wealth wields its power indirectly, all the more effectively, first, by means of the direct corruption of the officials America, second, by the means of the alliance between the government and the stock exchange. History has now confronted us with an immediate task, which is the most revolutionary of all the immediate tasks confronting the proletariat of any country. The fulfillment of this task, the destruction of the most powerful bulwark, not only of European, but it may now be said of Asiatic reaction, would make the Russian proletariat the vanguard of the international revolutionary proletariat. And we have the right to count upon acquiring this honorable title, already earned by our predecessors, the revolutionaries of the 70s, if we succeed in inspiring our movement, which is 1,000 times broader and deeper, with the same devoted determination and vigor. Our business is to help get everything possible done to make sure the last chance for a peaceful development of the revolution, to help by the presentation of our program, by making clear its national character, its absolute accord with the interests and demands of a vast majority of the population. Hang without fail, so the people see no fewer than 100 nonculaks, rich men, bloodsuckers. To call a fight for the Zionist idea of a Jewish nation, for the federal principle of party organization, a fight for the equality of the Jews in the world family of the proletariat is to degrade the struggle from the plane of ideas and principles to that of suspicion, incitement, and fanning of historically evolved prejudices. It glaringly reveals a lack of real ideas and principles as weapons of struggle. People always have been the foolish victims of deception and self-deception in politics, and they always will be until they have learned to seek out the interests of some class or other behind all moral, religious, political, and social phrases, declarations, and promises. It is stupid to tolerate Nicola. All Czechists have to be on alert to shoot anyone who doesn't turn up to work because of Nicola. The real emancipation of the Chinese people from age-long slavery would be impossible without the great, sincerely democratic enthusiasm which is rousing the working masses and making them capable of miracles, and which is evident from every sentence of Sun Yat-sen's platform. Abolition of the police, the army, and the bureaucracy. The salaries of all officials, all of whom are elective and displaceable at any time, not to exceed the average wage of a competent worker. It is not our immediate task to introduce socialism, but only to bring social production and the distribution of products at once under the control of the Soviets of workers' deputies. In our attitude towards the war, which under the new government of Lvov and company unquestionably remains on Russia's part a predatory imperialist war owing to the capitalist nature of that government, not the slightest concession to revolutionary defensism is permissible. Pacifism, the preaching of peace in the abstract, is one of the means of duping the working class. A basic condition for the necessary expansion of political agitation is the organization of comprehensive political exposure. Capitalism is commodity production at the highest stage of development, when labor power itself becomes a commodity. The growth of internal exchange, and particularly of international exchange, is a special feature of capitalism. The uneven and spasmodic character of the development of individual enterprises, of individual branches of industry and individual countries, is inevitable under the capitalist system. The status of women up to now has been compared to that of a slave. Women have been tied to the home, and only socialism can save them from this. They will only be completely emancipated when we change from small-scale individual farming to collective farming and collective working of the land. Trade unions and strikes cannot help in times of crisis when there is no demand for this commodity. They cannot change the conditions which convert labor power into a commodity and which doom the masses of working people to dire need and unemployment. To change these conditions, a revolutionary struggle against the whole existing social and political system is necessary. The industrial crisis will convince very many workers of the justice of this statement. It is not the business of socialists to help the younger and stronger robbers. Socialists must take advantage of the struggle between the robbers to overthrow all of them. To be able to do this, socialists must first of all tell the people the truth, namely, that this war is, in three respects, a war between slaveholders with the aim of consolidating slavery. You are known among us as a protector of the arts, so you must remember that, of all the arts, For us, the cinema is the most important. We would be deceiving both ourselves and the people if we concealed from the masses the necessity of a desperate, bloody war of extermination as the immediate task of the coming revolutionary action.